member of CETL. So,
It's nice to meet you both. For you that don't know me, I'm the program director at St. Mary's School of Medical Imaging. So we are new to Mount West. This is our first year of having courses taught from Mount West.
it's nice to
Absolutely.
meet you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to the folks that just came in. Kristen, I can confirm I can let people in
Okay,
from
great.
the waiting room. So I'll keep this section up. We've got Kendall. Kendall, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Kendall, and I am an adjunct in the communications department.
Excellent. I've heard your name before. It's nice to actually like hear your voice.
Oh, thank you.
All right, and then we have a the name is Zoom user. Can I ask who that is?
That's maybe me. This is
Yes.
Salim Salami. I'm a physics teacher.
Oh, hey, Salim.
Adjunct.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn this over to Kristen. Just to make sure everybody's aware, this session is being recorded. We are also going to upload this to our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning's YouTube channel, and we're going to send this out to all of the other adjuncts after the fact, just to make sure that if they can't be here, they still have access to this video where Kristen walks you guys through everything you need to know about assessment. So I'm going to go ahead and let her take it away.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen to put our presentation up there. And do you guys see that?
Absolutely.
All right, so introduction to assessment. Our agenda is going to cover some outcomes, assessment vocabulary. We're going to, of course, look at some adjunct assessment forms, and I will show you some examples. So learning outcomes identify, key assessment types. These are the outcomes for this session. I should say that. So we're going to identify key assessment types, things like formative, summative, direct, indirect, and associated assessment measures. We're going to look at the importance of assessment in supporting student learning, and we have an adjunct assessment form again that we will look at and go over. So to kind of start, what is assessment? You could put in the chat if you want to, or unmute if anybody wants to explain what they feel assessment is in their own words. You don't have to, but I appreciate it if you would. And if you feel like you don't have a really good idea of it, um, of course, it's just as simple as assessment is kind of a way of evaluating, right? So, to get into assessment as far as terms, vocabulary, to assess is to evaluate students have achieved a learning outcome. So we're looking at, did they learn what we wanted them to learn? And if they did not, what can we do? What does that assessment data kind of show us to help us improve their learning? And so assessment can refer to different varieties and methods that are used to gauge the extent that students have achieved a learning outcome. So we look at, have they acquired a certain skill? Have they exhibited a certain behavior? What are we getting from our data? What is it showing us? And so measure is our next term. And so as a noun, a measure refers to the assignment, task, or activity that we're using to actually assess that student learning. And then the verb used generally would mean something similar to assess, as in, how do we actually measure learning in communication courses? And so Bloom's taxonomy, most of you, or probably all of you, are very familiar with Bloom's, most likely. If you're not, it's a series of categories that have types of learning and knowledge that can be divided. And so what Bloom's does is it helps us as educators to determine what level students should be learning. And so learning outcomes are statements that express what students should be able to do as a result of completing a individual course or even their degree. And their composition is aided by, of course, Bloom's taxonomy. You will start to see things will start to kind of align the more that we get into this and talk more about it. So Melt West has, of course, course, gen ed, program, and co-curricular outcomes. And we'll talk about those a little bit more later on. Alignment, this will keep popping up as well. Alignment is a logical connection between course level outcomes, module or unit level outcomes, and the assignments themselves that we're using to measure those. Closing the loop will be a term when we go over the actual assessment report that we might get into a little more. But closing the loop is a phrase that refers to the conclusion of an assessment cycle. What you'll kind of start to see is that if you teach that course every semester or once a year, there is an assessment cycle that you will get familiar with, where you will start to assess this course and you will start to maybe assess the same measure and outcomes until the loop is closed. And so what it's meaning is, in order to effectively close the assessment loop, there are certain things that have to be met. And those are assessing the learning outcome, using the data you've gathered to determine where the improvements are needed, implementing those actual improvements, and then reassessing the same outcome to see if the learning has improved. Once those things have been met, then you can officially say the loop has been closed, and then you can assess another measure, another outcome once the loop has been closed. So we also have direct assessment and indirect assessment. And so direct assessment measures, those allow students to demonstrate what they know and what they can do with their knowledge. And indirect measures are based on perceived student learning. So some examples would be surveys, focus groups, reflections. Then we have formative and summative assessment. You likely already have a good idea of what these are if you don't already know, but formative assessment, that monitors student progress as they're going through a course. And to help remember the distinction, think of this as being the stage wherein which the knowledge is starting to form and is forming. Summative assessment assesses student success at the end of a course, usually is compared with or against some kind of standard like a learning outcome. And with types of assessment, we have, of course, formative. This is a big component of student success. And so Mount West, we have heard the phrase assess early and often, and formative assessments help to really make that possible. And I would even maybe add to this, because I teach my students this, they're early childhood and elementary ed students. So they learn a lot of assessment. And so I tell them assessment should always be ongoing. So, you know, we completed an assessment report at the end of a course, but we really should be collecting assessment data through our assignments and looking at our outcomes, even module outcomes, the whole time that we're teaching, to keep it ongoing to see student progress. And so some examples of formative assessment could include the following, which would be discussion boards, things that you're already doing in your classes, in-class discussions, surveys, pop quizzes, workshops, small individual or group projects as well. So you're assessing outcomes through the assignments that you're giving. And summative assessment is another type, and those inform an instructor about the student's abilities to both comprehend and use the sum of knowledge that's been gained in that course. And so some examples for this summative assessment would be exams, oral presentations, research essays, portfolios, and final projects. We also have indirect and direct assessment, of course, and I always kind of laugh and tell students sometimes we need to know what not to do. So for this one, we're going to talk about what some do's are for assessment and what some do not. Don't do this. So some do's would be assess early and often, and again, I would say ongoing, but also consider a variety of both indirect and direct assessment. because this promotes critical thinking and skilled application throughout your courses, and utilize specific assessment metrics to provide timely feedback and connect assessments to learning outcomes plus real-world experiences. And some don'ts. Utilize indirect assessment as a means for providing comprehensive assessment, and stay away from being subjective. Also joke and tell my students, assessment doesn't have a place for your feelings, because sometimes we have an idea of in our heads of what we think students can do because we kind of get to know them, but that is really not accurate assessment. We have to be able to actually see it, measure it, have proof of it, analyze it, do data collection. So that's what this is meaning. Do not rely on subjective interpretation to set student success, or to help you set a benchmark or a rubric or other assessment metrics. Of course, stay away from being subjective with that as well. And so, assessment metrics, we have rubrics. These are typically constructed with 4 to 5 proficiency levels, and it gives a breakdown of content areas that you want to assess, and how the students can successfully meet specific assignment criteria. And what rubrics can do, and what large benefits to using a rubric is, it gives timely, constructive, focused feedback. It helps eliminate being subjective and having subjective interpretation, and generate comprehensive assessment data. And we've recently, as you all are well aware, kind of gone to Blackboard Ultra, and there is a little feature in there where you can create your own rubric and upload it directly to the assignment. I have found that super successful this semester for assessment purposes, and it really has made my grading quicker. And also, students can view that before they begin assignments, so they know exactly how they're being graded and what the expectations are. So I feel like it is really good at giving you really accurate, effective data of what students actually know and what they've learned. Student success benchmarks. So student success benchmark is a goal that you set as the instructor that pertains to the learning that has been achieved. So an example would be 75% of students will receive at least an 80% on the final. So if you decide that you're going to assess your final exam, you want to have a benchmark that, of course, could be achieved and that is realistic. And so this one, of course, 75% receive at least an 80. That is easy to assess and see if you've met that benchmark. Some benefits to this: it helps define what success is in an assignment that's not traditionally scored by a rubric, and then provide a concrete baseline for future improvements. So the bottom line with assessment is that assessment metrics exist to help students understand their performance and to help drive assessment data. So before we move on, because we're going to get closer to getting into assessment reports and how you fill those out and what's required, what questions do you have?
And there's no such thing as a stupid question, especially when it comes to assessment.
Totally agree. Yes, for sure.
Hi, this is Debbie. We started using Blackboard Ultra 2 last year, but I was not aware of the rubric that can be assigned to the course. So I would really like to learn how to do that. It sounds like it would be very helpful.
Sure. At the end, once we go through the assessment reports, I don't mind at all to bring up Blackboard and kind of show you how you can do that. There's a couple
that'd be great.
Yeah, you can have it automatically generate, or you can create your own. I personally just like to create my own just because I can make it very specific to what I'm wanting to measure and what I want to evaluate and things like that. So Debbie, I'm so happy to do that at the end. I will share my screen and then go through the steps of how to do that. And of course, this is being recorded, so it's also something that you guys could refer back to at any time. But yes, that is a very nice feature with Blackboard Ultra that I have been using a lot. So I'm glad you mentioned that. All right, is there anything else that I could answer? As Morgan said, there is not a stupid question, especially when it comes to assessment, because assessment, it's very involved. All right, so no questions. If there's something you don't want to unmute and ask, you're welcome to put it in the chat. But we will talk about alignment. So your course outcomes are written in each syllabus, and most likely what happens is when you start here, you're given a syllabus template, and of course you can go in and edit everything, and you're probably going to work with your program coordinator or a chair, and they will give you a syllabus that has been used previously and it already has outcomes and everything on it. I can appreciate that adjunct instructors and people that are new want to maybe do some outcome changes. However, there is a process that it does have to officially go through. Faculty and adjuncts, we're not supposed to go through and just change those. We are supposed to push those through a curriculum committee. And so if you get your previous syllabus for the course you're going to be teaching and you feel like the outcome should be changed, there's a couple of people that you could talk to about that, and they can help you go through the process and the curriculum change if it's needed. So that would be either a program coordinator that you work very closely with that probably helps you get your materials for your course and helps you get set up in Blackboard and different things like that, or it can be a chair. And at the end of these slides, there is a directory and some contact information. So if you don't know who your chair is, her information is listed at the end. And also, again, program coordinators. And so the reason those outcomes are there is because the outcomes help to guide assessment. And so when you assign a major assignment, like a project, for example, it should measure at least one of the outcomes. And a lot of times what you're going to find is if it's a larger assignment, it's probably going to meet 2 or 3 outcomes from your syllabus, because all of that, again, should be in an alignment. And so a tip that's on here is to consider your gen ed outcome, which those are already on your syllabus that you're given. But if your class is assessing oral communication, for example, how are students specifically demonstrating that particular skill? And it's vital that we carefully align assessment measures to specific outcomes, because if there is not alignment, and I have not been 100% on that in the past, I'll be honest, then what happens is when you go to do your assessment report, your data collection for your assessment is not going to give you what you're looking for. So that is the significance of ensuring everything aligns. A big thing too is always take attendance as often as you're able to. I recommend, and you don't have to do things, of course, the way that I do by any means, but I always take a minute just at the beginning of the class to just go through, pull up attendance tracker, take attendance really quick, and then get started, and just kind of let students have a minute to kind of talk for a few minutes, and lets me get my attendance in so it's done and over with. Some of you may teach online, and if you do, you can do your attendance based off of them submitting work on a certain day. So an example would be I teach a community and families course right now. It's all online. I set my attendance tracking as a Thursday. So my assignments are due on Thursday evenings, and then I'll do my attendance on Friday. If they didn't submit the work, then I count them as absent. If they submitted the work, then of course I would count them as attending. There is an attendance policy listed in the syllabus that you're given here at Mount West. Of course, take a look at that, go by that as much as you can. Any questions about attendance? I feel like sometimes there can be confusion if it's an online class. So why assess at all? Why go through all of this? We assess for a few reasons, or a lot of reasons actually, but of course the big one is to improve student learning, to improve instructional materials and methods, and generate comprehensive data on said improvements. And some best practices, of course, is alignment. I kind of mentioned this would pop up several times. You want to have alignment of course outcomes. And so I have an example here of an objective from a syllabus. So examine the standards of ethical behavior in early care and education. And so to align that, there's an ethical dilemma assignment. And as you can see, those directly align. Also, best practice attendance assignments due weekly. Of course, I mentioned earlier that's how you track attendance weekly. If it's like an online course, hybrid course, you count attendance by work submitted. And of course, the same for an in-person, and if they're physically there. Missing work constitutes the student being absent. And then something should be due weekly to count attendance. And there is a Blackboard minimum use policy that should include grades that are up to date, and attendance should be input weekly. And attendance also at the beginning of the semester is highly important too, because then you get into the financial aid aspects and different things. So as far as communication, you want to communicate, of course, with your program coordinators. My information is listed, but the chair on the left there that's listed, Chair of LATS, Kendra, her information is there, but also the directory. If this is not your area, ECE elementary, then check out your directory. But I imagine once you've already been hired and all the things, you're very familiar with who your program coordinator is. All right, so this is the actual assessment report form that will be sent out to you. If you've not already done one of these, it's set up very neatly. It's organized, super easy, and it's very easy to just input exactly what we're asking for. Some of the data can be pulled from Blackboard too, which we'll kind of show you that in a second. But just to start out on the form, this gets emailed, probably will come from Morgan from CETL. And so you just should be able to open this link. If it makes you sign in, of course, use your MCTC email, but it's just going to ask, the very basics, you know, your name, and then the course name, and the course learning outcomes that are being assessed, that will come off of your syllabus. So again, like I kind of mentioned earlier on, those are already listed in the syllabus. You should be able to pick out at least, I think we have to have at least 2 now. Is that right, Morgan? On the updated form?
Okay. So for your course learning outcomes, we would like to see that you are assessing 2 of those course learning outcomes. We do that because hopefully these outcomes in your courses are not existing within a vacuum. Like you've got one assignment, it only touches on one outcome, and that is that. So we do want to see you assessing 2 of those course learning outcomes. I want to note while we're talking about that too, and Kristen touched on this a little bit earlier about how those outcomes are provided in your syllabus. Please do not change them. That has been something that we have encountered in the past. Whenever you are brought on to teach a course, make sure that the outcomes that are provided for you in that syllabus remain the same. Please do not touch any verbiage in there. In order to change those, they have to go through curriculum, and it's a gigantic process. So definitely make sure that you are using the verbiage that is in the syllabus specifically.
Morgan, I would like to ask, just because I feel like this will come up.
Uh-huh.
I know they're required to have 2 outcomes listed. If they wanted to have 3, I'm sure that's okay, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Would you say there's a thing as too many outcomes listed? Should we go
No,
no more than 3, or does it matter?
I wouldn't say there's such a thing as too many outcomes listed unless, and this would get really crazy. And if you work in the anything related to the healthcare field, you probably know this. Sometimes you'll have third-party accreditors that will give a given course 80 plus outcomes, which is wild. So in a case like that, likely you can't get all of them into a single report anyway. But I'll use the English department as an example. There are 5 course learning outcomes, and we assess all of them in our course report. So if you have an assignment and it does assess all of your course learning outcomes and there are 4 or 5 of them, list them all. That's fine. Bear in mind, you will have to talk about how they align to the assignment as you're filling out the report. You will need to provide that context. But nah, there's not really a this is way too many outcomes threshold there. As long as you're able to discuss that alignment that Kristen mentioned earlier, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, so again, simplistic, especially at the beginning, just your name, course number, division. And so then you have to list your outcomes. As Morgan and I were saying, you have to have at least 2 there. And then your gen ed outcomes that go with those. And then you have to have a measure of your course learning outcome. And so this would be where you're going to describe the assignment or measure that you use to assess the learning outcomes that you previously listed. Not the gen ed outcomes, but the course learning outcomes. And as Morgan was saying, those are the ones that are really pre-listed for you, that you are kind of supposed to leave there, because those do have to go through curriculum to be changed. But those are the ones you want to use and then be able to explain the assignment that goes with it. So an example would be, like I showed you earlier, the outcome that mentioned ethics in early childhood, basically. So I had an assignment that was a paper about moral justification and ethics in early childhood and what early childhood professionals have to do to be ethically sound. And there's a certain document they have to be able to pull from to get that information. And so if that's what I were doing, of course, I would have that ethics outcome mentioned, and then I would go into the whole process of okay, this is the assignment, this is what they have to do, this is the paper they do, they use this document, and this is, what is required. And then your next part is, did you use a rubric? Most of the time I would say it's probably going to be a yes, but of course, if you did not, it is okay to put no. It is not required that you do. Did I go too far? Okay. Then you have to come up with your benchmark, like we talked about earlier, that percentage of students that you want to score at least a certain grade. So I've used here the benchmark for success for the responsive teacher paper assignment was 85% of the students will score at least an 80%. And so, Morgan, if my benchmark is met, does that mean that my loop has officially closed?
That is a fantastic question. So I'm going to approach this from 2 different angles here. Let's say that hypothetically you've been an adjunct for us before. Maybe you submitted a physics. I'm going to pick on Salim here. Let's say that Salim submitted a physics report last semester, or rather last year, because each course is assessed once a year. And in that report, let's say that the benchmark wasn't met and then decided, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z next time I teach this class. And now it's a year later, you made those changes, and yes, the benchmark was met. In that case, 100%, the loop is closed. However, if you are new to assessment here at Mount West, or if you are assessing a new set of outcomes for the first time, if they meet that benchmark once, that's really just the first time you assessed it. I don't want to say that it's a fluke necessarily, but it'll need to to be replicated. You can't close a loop the first time you assess something. So if you're doing it a second time and you see that success, they meet that benchmark, you're good to go. But if it's your first time doing it, no, that would not count as closing the loop.
Okay.
Thank you. That's good explanation. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. And if they're on the form, if there's a place to upload or put a link to a rubric, of course you would do that.
I have the questions here. As I teach the three section online physics, basically these sections are typical. Everything same assignment, no difference. That means I have to do it for each section, or I aggregate all of them in one assessment.
Good question. And I'm sure there are going to be other people who are in the same situation. You are going to aggregate all of them into one report.
Okay.
So, for example, I'm going to use English again. There are 5 of us that teach English. That's not even getting into our adjuncts. And when I wrote our report for English 101 in fall, I sent out an email to everybody and I said, hey, gang who teach our a million different sections, just send me your data. I'm going to put it all in one report. So even though we have almost 20 sections of English 101, there was only one report.
Okay. Good. That's very good, actually. I actually each section 25 students. The total 75 is not bad.
Ooh.
I mean,
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of students.
Yes.
but generally could be worse, you know.
That's true. That's very, very true. I'm thinking about having to do like 25 rough drafts and final drafts for each individual class.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you're very right. It could be worse.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to aggregate them just and
Perfect.
see how it's.
All right. So your next question is you would have to then show results of the measure. And so I took this directly from Blackboard. I went into results distribution for this specific assignment, and it gave me a really good breakdown of how many students scored what. And then at the bottom, I just typed out of 7 students, 3 scored an A. Out of 7 students, 0 scored a B, so on and so forth. So Blackboard will really give you your data as long as you've put everything in Blackboard as far as the grades, of course, and you go into the results distribution. It already gives you a very good breakdown. And of course, if you were to use a rubric, you can get some information from that in Blackboard as well to use. And so after you have looked at your data and looked at the breakdown of the results of the measure, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to then talk about what those results indicate about student performance. In other words, how did they do based off of the data? And so as you can see here, I put, results indicate the benchmark for success has not been met. So this is exactly where you want to talk more about the benchmark, if it was successful, if they have not met it, and what that means. And so I go on to say, after a review of grades from the rubric, scores indicate all students who made a C lost points due to grammatical errors, a works cited page, and in-text citations. And so I'm just talking about they didn't include in-text citations, the works cited page, just they gave me links instead of actually citing it correctly based off of MLA formatting. And so that then leads me into, how am I going to improve this, or how am I going to maintain what has happened? And so in this case, they did not meet their benchmark. And so if they did not meet their benchmark, then I want to be able to make a plan for improvement to see if I can get them to meet the benchmark the next time that I teach it. Let's say that I did meet the benchmark and all was well and I felt good about it, then I would do more of a maintenance. I will continue to do basically what I'm doing, and this is how I will do maintenance of that. So for this one particularly, they did not meet the benchmark, and so I made a improvement plan. And so I put in here, the results indicate the benchmark had not been met. and I plan to change the scoring of the assignment to make it worth more points. I added points that require a writing center visit. And of course, that is to help with the grammatical issues, the MLA formatting, and the lack of citations. And I go on to say it's an online course. Students will be required to email the paper to the Writing Center, and they will get points again for the Writing Center visit. And I will add that to the rubric I was already using. And otherwise, though, the rubric will stay the same. And so what I would do is I would reassess this the next time it was taught. So in my case, my courses are set up, they're offered just fall only, spring only, which I'm not sure. I'd say most of your alls are the same way, but I would just reassess this. I teach this one in the fall, so I would reassess it in the next fall. So it just very simplistic at the end here. Which semester will these be implemented, and when will you reassess? And that's pretty well it for the assessment report itself. Other than, I will say, the assessment committee here at Mount West, they have gone through all these assessment reports, and now you're going to kind of see in Blackboard some scoring, and they use a rubric to do so. So once you do your first one or even your second one, all of those you start to get feedback on based off of a rubric, and they do scoring. And then they also will give you comments about, things that were great on it or things that you could improve on, which I have found to be super helpful. But is there any questions that you all have about assessment in general, the reports, how you close the loop, outcomes, anything that Morgan and I could maybe help you with?
Yes, for my course, I'm going to assess my course for the spring the 2026, but I'm going to teach the same course in the summer. But I'm not going really to reassess it. I'm going to reassess in the fall because summer kind of a little bit different than the normal semester. That is, what do you think? I mean, that it's good to reassess in the summer or just wait to the fall?
I would defer to wherever the course is, wherever it's put in your course assessment cycle.
Okay.
Wherever it is there, if it says in that course assessment cycle it's in the fall, I would assess it in the fall. We have that specific.
Oh, okay, okay. I have to talk to the course coordinator.
Yes, yeah, I would
Okay.
definitely do that. We do that
Oh,
for a couple different reasons. Chief of which is when we meet with our accrediting body, we're going to
oh,
show them this happens this semester, this happens this semester. So we just want to
okay.
make sure everything's going in at the right time.
I'll talk with Mr. Black, see what we're gonna do.
Sounds good. Any other questions, comments, concerns, anxieties?
I think it's very informative.
Hey, this is Debbie. I do have a question about closing the loop.
Mhm.
Okay, after that happens, what's the next step? I mean, how do
Absolutely.
you reassess after you've closed the loop?
That's a fantastic question. So I do want to add some nuance to the loop closing section before I get to that part of the question. We had someone come up to me during in-service at the very beginning of the semester, and she said, "So technically I've closed this loop, but as somebody who's been in this field for a long time, I know that demonstrated success once does not necessarily mean it's going to happen again. Can I stay with this group of outcomes?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's your call." So some of that, there is some nuance to it. If you are not ready to move on and you would like to see success over 2 years, you can. Let's say that, though, hypothetically, like you just posed, you meet that success standard. What's next? You move on to the next group of outcomes. Unless you are in a situation like with English 101, where we assess all of our outcomes all the time. What that means for us is we dig really deep into individual outcomes. So we are assessing all of them, but our primary focus for next year, for example, for English 101, is how are students utilizing and citing scholarly sources. That's really the focus of our assessment. That's where our primary change is happening, even though we're still assessing all of the outcomes at once, because an essay will do that for all of the outcomes that we have listed. But if you meet those two that you are assessing this time around and your loop closes, you'll move on to the next two.
Okay, well, thank you.
Of course.
Is there
And
any?
Kristen's going to walk you guys through the assessment committee's fancy Blackboard Ultra course shell, which is where you can submit everything, get resources, all kinds of stuff.
Yes. So to find this, you should just see it when you log into Blackboard. But if you are like me and for some reason you don't, I use the search bar and just type in the course I'm looking for. So if you just go to that at the top of Blackboard when you log in and you type in assessment, this should show up to you guys. This is what our Blackboard shell. You should have access to it. And so there's several things in here. What might be, of course, very helpful to you guys is to check out the adjunct assessment module in here. And so this has everything related to adjunct assessment process. And so this serves as a little refresher for assessment, and adjunct assessment, it kind of answers what you should do. And so it gives you some information of who to reach out to, which of course Morgan is listed, and our dean as well. But both of them can certainly help you with that. And then also, this is super helpful as well. We have best practices and resources in here. And it just, of course, gives you, best practices for completing assessment measures. And then there's some resources there. And I think that is pretty well it. Morgan, is there any of these that I should maybe?
I would just pop into assessment basics just to give them
Okay.
an idea if you want to yeah, and that's enough. So the way that this is set up is we've got different modules with different kinds of information. So the section that you're seeing right now on your screen is very similar to what we're doing right now. What is assessment? What does it look like at Mount West? What resources are available to you through the CETL? Things of that nature. So let's say that you want the information that you're getting right now, but you don't want to go back through the recording, which again, you'll have access to likely tomorrow afternoon once I get everything uploaded. You can also just go to Blackboard. We've got our assessment glossary, why we do it, contact info, all of the basics for what assessment is and how it works in this course module. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of our course and our program assessment, we have modules for those too, all of which include sample forms and examples and lots of resources. So everything we do pertaining to assessment, it's all in this Blackboard course shell.
Yeah, assessment at Mount West, course assessment, program assessment, gen ed. I mean, it really covers everything, and CETL, of course, has some information out there, YouTube channel, and procedures, different things here. So, like Morgan was saying, this is recorded. We will upload this, but you also have this Blackboard shell, and that's going to be very helpful to you as well.
Yeah,
And
this is very helpful. I have a question though. How can I get this presentation to the rest of my faculty?
Sure. So I will email everybody who got that calendar invite. So everybody on my list will get the copy of this video. They'll get a link to it on YouTube. And then what I can also do is, let's see. I can download the same slides that Kristen is using right now. I've got them in a Google Doc slide deck. I can put those in the chat that you can download, and I can also send them to you in that email.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, any resources you guys need, we are happy to provide.
yes. Is there anything else that we could answer for you guys? Is there anything that we did not go over that you wish you knew more about?
No, it's been very helpful. I appreciate it.
If you guys want to hang out for a minute, I will share my screen and show you how you get to create a rubric within Blackboard with an assignment. I know Debbie had asked about that. If you're interested in that and you want to hang out, you're more than welcome to. I'll share screen and show that. If not, thank you for attending. And like Morgan mentioned, this will be sent out. You'll have the recording. And if you have any questions, Morgan, of course, is a great resource. So I appreciate you guys attending.
Yes, thank you guys so much for attending. I am going to go ahead and stop our recording now too.
And there